Today's lesson is review 2, and this is a review on fractions. So first of all, let's go over the two parts that make up a fraction. A fraction has a numerator and a denominator. So it's the numerator over the denominator. The numerator represents how many parts are present, and the denominator represents how many total parts you have. So, for example, let's just think about pizza. If we have a whole pizza, there are typically 8 slices in that pizza. So there's our 8 slices. Well, let's say you have actually eaten 5 of those slices. So we're going to get rid of 5. All that's left over is 3 slices of pizza. So what we have left, those 3 of 8 pieces, is 3/8 of your pizza. Okay, let's get rid of the pizza and talk about addition and subtraction and how that is done with fractions. So with addition and subtraction, we really have 2 rules when it comes to fractions. The first rule of addition and subtraction is that you have to have a common denominator. So number 1, I need a common denominator. That means that the bottom number on both of my fractions has to be the same in order for me to add or subtract. The second thing is that you just add or you just subtract straight across the numerator. So let's look at an example of something. This one will be pretty straightforward. So let's say I have 8/10. So 8/10, and I'm adding 1/10. This should be a review from a long time ago for you. Since we have a common denominator, both of them have a 10 in the denominator, we can just add the 8 and 1 straight across the numerator, so we end up with 9/10. Another pretty straightforward example, let's say we have 3/8. Actually, let's change color here. We have 3/8, and we are subtracting 2/8. Well, once again, I have a common denominator here. I have an 8 in both of the denominators, so I can just subtract 3 minus 2 to get 1/8, or 1 slice of my 8 slices of pizza. So that's addition and subtraction with a common denominator. When we have a different denominator, that's where it gets a little bit different, and that also seems to be where people kind of freak out. So in my next example here, I have 1/3 plus 3/6. I know that in addition and subtraction of fractions, I have to have a common denominator. And right now, I have a 3 and I have a 6. Those are not common denominators. So what I need to do to fix that is make a list of all the multiples of both of my denominators. Let's start with 3. Multiples of 3 are 3. 3 times 2 would be 6. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times 5 is 15, and so on. Now the multiples of 6. 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 3 is 18. 6 times 4 is 24. And really I don't need to go any further because I see something in this list. What I see is that I have a common denominator. that common denominator is 6. Or that's my least common multiple, the smallest number that both 3 and 6 can multiply to. So now that I've identified that number, it is my goal to make both of these denominators turn into a 6. So, moving along, we have two fractions that we're adding. Now this first fraction, it's a 3, we need it to be a 6. So I ask myself, what do I need to multiply 3 by in order to get a 6? And I know that 3 times 2 will give me 6. So I'm going to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by 2. I have to multiply both of those by 2 because if I only multiply 1, then it's not balancing out the fraction. So 2 times 1 will give me 2. 2 times 3 gives me 6. Now I move on to my next fraction, this 3/6, and remember my goal is to get a 6 in the denominator. Well, I notice I already have a 6 in the denominator, so that means I don't need to multiply it by anything to make it 6 because it already is 6. So we have 3/6. Now that I have my two common denominators, I can just add my numerators together. And I know that 2 plus 3 gives me 5. So I'm left with 5/6. I've added another subtraction of fractions down below. And what I want you to do now is push pause and take a minute to do 3/4 minus 1/6, and then we'll go over your answer and see if you got the right answer. So here's the solution that I got. I started making a list. I made a list of the multiples of 4, and then I made a list of the multiples of 2, and I stopped when I got to 12 because I noticed that that was common between 4 and 6. In order to get the 4 to turn into a 12, I had to multiply the numerator and denominator both by 3, which gave me my 9/12. To get the 6 to turn to a 12, I had to multiply by 2. So once again, both the numerator and the denominator, that gives me 2/12. I have a common denominator, and 9 minus 2 is 12. We're going to move along now to multiplication. And remember, if you are feeling stuck or you think it's going too fast and you need to listen again, don't hesitate to pause and rewind and watch something over again. So with multiplication, what I remember when I multiply is just straight across. We multiply the numbers straight across the numerator, and then we multiply the numbers straight across the denominator. I want to caution you guys to not say cross multiply. I've had a lot of different people tell me you just cross multiply, and that can refer to multiplication, division, to simplifying the fraction. I really don't know what people are talking about sometimes when they say cross multiply, because I don't think they're using the right term. So stray away from this cross multiplying idea and instead just think straight across. So for our example, when we multiply 3/7 times 5/9, I know to multiply straight across, so I'm just going to take that 3, multiply it by 5, 7, multiply it by 9, and that is going to give me my answer of 15/63. Now this is actually a fraction that I can simplify because I look at 15 and 63 and I notice that those two numbers have something in common. What they have in common is that they both can be divided by the number 3. So let's go ahead and divide each of these by 3. Oops. Let's get on the pencil. There we go. So 15 divided by 3, 63 divided by 3. And 15 divided by 3 will leave me with 5. 63 divided by 3 will leave me with 21. And when we're simplifying, we always want to ask, can I go further? Can I go further? So is there anything in common between between the 5 and the 21? No, there's not. So I can't go any further. Let's look at another example. Negative 4 over 3 times 6 over 15. Once again, multiplication, we just go straight across. So negative 4 times positive 6 gives me negative 24. And then multiply straight across, 3 times 15 is going to give me a positive 45. So I'm left with negative 24 over 45. And here, once again, I'm asking myself, can I go further? Well, actually, this time I can once again. And, interestingly enough, it is once again divisible by 3. I know that a negative divided by a positive equals a negative. So negative 24 divided by 3 will leave me with negative 8. Positive 45 divided by positive 3 gives me positive 15. And negative 8 and 15 don't have any common factors, so we cannot simplify any further. Let's do one last multiplication example before we move on to division. This example is multiplying a whole number. Let's make that look more like an 8. Close enough. A whole number times a fraction. Okay, so we have negative 2 over 19, and we are multiplying that by 8. You can think of 8 as of a fraction, 8 over 1. That's exactly what it is. That's saying we have one whole thing, and we have that whole thing 8 times. So 8 wholes of 1. So let's just multiply straight across. Negative 16, we're getting there. 1 times 19 gives me positive 19. And I also ask myself, do these two numbers have any common factors? No, they do not. So I am done. Alright, finally we're moving on to the last math operation, and that is division. The way we remember division of fractions is to multiply by the reciprocal. Now, what is the reciprocal? The reciprocal kind of means the opposite. So that means we're going to flip the fraction over. The easy way, or the kind of rhyme, I guess it's not really a rhyme, but the other way I like to think of this is copy dot flip. And that will make sense in a second. So let's say our example is 1/3 divided by 3/8. So when I say multiply by the reciprocal, what I mean is that I need to take this number, and instead of division, I'm going to multiply it by this one flipped, not fractioned. So this is where copy dot flip comes in. First, I copy that first fraction that I saw. So I rewrite 1/3. The dot means I'm taking that division symbol and I'm turning it into a multiplication symbol, or just a dot. And then the flip is where I take this 3/8 and I flip it upside down into 8/3. Now, just by using copy dot flip, I've turned this fraction, this division problem, into a multiplication of fractions, which we know we just multiply straight across. So 1 times 8 is 8, 3 times 3 is 9, and 1/3 divided by 3/8 is 8/9. Let's do one more example. This time, let's do 12/5 divided by 6. So first we copy, then we dot, and then now we flip. But this is the part where some people get stuck, because they look at that 6 and they think, how do I flip it over? It's not even a fraction. Well, how I do that is I draw this 6/1 to remind myself that it is a fraction, that this fraction is 6/1, not just plain old 6. So when I flip it, it becomes 1/6. Now let's multiply straight across, and I get 12/30. And of course, I always want to ask myself, is there a common factor between these two numbers? Well, 12 can be divided by 6, and 30 also can be divided by 6. So when I do 12 divided by 6, whoops, I keep doing the wrong thing. 12 divided by 6 and 30 divided by 6. What I'm going to end up with here is 2/5. So 12/5 divided by 6 is 2/5 right there. Finally, let's just end on a quick review of simplifying. So far, as we've looked at on these previous grades, I've simplified at the end. Like right here, I simplified at the end. Here and here, I simplified at the end. Now this time, we're going to simplify earlier on. So let's take 4/8. Sorry, that's a lie. Let's take 8/10 and multiply it by 1/2. Now you can do this by dividing the numerator and denominator by the same multiple or the same factor, or we can do it by cross-canceling. This is where the whole cross-canceling thing is okay. So when I look at this 8 and 2, I recognize that they both have a common factor, and the common factor that they share is 2. So if I divide this by 2, 2 divided by 2 will leave me with 1. If I divide 8 by 2, 8 divided by 2 will leave me with 4. So when I multiply across now, I have 4 times 1 is 4, 10 times 1 is 10. Always ask yourself, can I go further? Well, right now I look at this and I see, yes, I can go further, because 4 and 10 can also still be divided by 2. 4 divided by 2 leaves me with 2. 10 divided by 2 leaves me with a 5. So what I have left over, my simplest answer is 2/5. Let's look at the same one and do it a little bit differently. So previously, I did 8 divided by 2, 2 divided by 2 to get that 4 and 1. Now this time, I'm going to take a look at my first fraction. I see that 8 and 10 are both even numbers. They're both divisible by 2. So that will become 4, and that will become 5. We can go ahead and multiply across now, or we can see that this new 4 and this 2 are both divisible by 2. So let's cross that 4 out and change it to a 2, because 4 divided by 2 is 2. Cross this 2 out, and 2 divided by 2 is 1. And then we multiply straight across. 2 times 1 is 2. 5 times 1 is 5. And you'll see we did it a different way, but we got the exact same answer. Let's do one more example. This example is going to be 5/7 divided by let's make this 10/3. Well, first thing I want to do is copy dot flip. Copy 5/7, division turns to a dot, and then flip it. Next, I want to simplify now if I can, so I'm going to check 5 and 7. Do they have a common factor? No. 3 and 10, do they have a common factor? No. Do 7 and 3 have a common factor? No. Do 5 and 10 have a common factor? Yes. That common factor that they share is 5. So if I do 5 divided by 5, that will become a 1. Let's make that look more like a 1. 10 divided by 5, that number is going to become a 2. Now when I multiply across, 1 times 3 is 3. 7 times 2 is 14. So the fraction that I'm left with is 3/14. If there's any part of this that you didn't understand or you need some more help with it, feel free to rewind and rewatch it. Also, please take a minute to write down any questions that you have in your notebook, so when you come to class tomorrow, you will remember what those questions are and be able to ask them.